All right, let's get started. Okay, great. Good morning, everyone. That's me. My name is Jeremy Cherney, and I'm the owner and founder of Tobin Solutions. We do cybersecurity services and IT services for businesses around Wisconsin. And we've been doing a lot of webinars on security, educating people about security best practices, about security in general, actions they can take. And we had kind of a call for a presentation like this, which is that we're assuming that you understand that you want to have security in place already, so we don't have to convince you of that, but you kind of want to know what are the foundational things, what are those minimum basics that you can do to provide a core secure foundation. And so that's what this presentation is about. We are going to be muting all of you while we have this presentation. But if you do have questions, feel free to use the chat box and we can answer those along the way. There'll also be an opportunity at the end to ask questions. Like I said, this is a newer webinar. It's an evolution of some other ones we've done. So you will receive a brief survey at the end along with the opportunity to get the slides. And we're also recording this, so this will be available on YouTube when it's all complete as well. But your feedback's so valuable to us, so let us know how it's going. So one of the things we really want to make sure people are clear about and why the foundation is so important is that security is only as good as its weakest link. So I love this slide. It just demonstrates it so perfectly, right? You've got this really nice strong lock. You've got these big, thick links of a chain and then a little piece of shoelace tying it all together. And really, sometimes security is that way for people. They think they've got a lot of things in place. They think they've got a solid foundation, but when you go back and look, you see some things that are missing there. So we'll get into some of that. And as you were going through this conversation, um, look for yourself. Ask yourself, where are you protected here? Where are you not protected? Someone's saying they don't see my slides. Let's see. It looks like people are seeing the. Can I just do a quick check-in? Are other people seeing my screen? One person says I don't see it. Amanda, can you see our screen? Amanda's with Tobin. She's on here the call as well. Okay, great. Thank you all for responding. So one person, Arlene, you said you can't see the slide. Hopefully, I don't know, maybe refresh your screen or uh, go out and come back in. I'm not sure why you're not seeing it, but others are. So sorry about that. Yeah, so so you want to be looking for yourself as we go through this. Where are you protected? Where are you not when we look at some of these foundational things? Where are you following some of these best practices and where are you not? And really the opportunity for that is to, once you know something, you can get into action around it. You can take some actions if you want. Without knowing, you don't know. It's kind of a blind spot. But so as we go through, you want to look at that. A lot of times when we talk to people, they say, what can I buy? Just tell me what product I need to get so I can be secure. Is it going to be antivirus? Is it a new firewall? Is it one of Tobin's managed security services that we provide? And, not any one of those things stands on its own. Security is not just a product you buy. It's really about a process you follow. A great example of that is, if you have a lock on your garage, does that mean your garage is secure? And some of you might be saying yes. I would say, well, no, the lock alone does not make your garage secure. Enabling the lock, turning the lock so that it's actually locked, and then jiggling your door to know that it's working is actually what makes you be secure. So that's what we mean by a process and not a product. So why security? When we IT people talk about security, you're here because you're interested in security. Um, you know, you, what specifically is it that we're trying to accomplish when we think about security? And it really falls under three categories. The first is, you may have concerns about the confidentiality of your data, your systems, either internal or external. Might be something you're sharing internally in your office. It might be things you're sharing with clients, but you want to maintain that confidentiality. So that's one consideration around security and why people implement security solutions. Another aspect of it is just the integrity of your data and systems, making sure that it hasn't been corrupted, there hasn't been any unauthorized changes. That examples of that would be maybe you've got a payroll system and only the payroll people have access to the payroll system. Maybe you've got a rogue employee who wants to go in and look at other people's payroll data, which would be a confidentiality breach, or worse, they might even want to change their payroll information, give themselves a salary increase or something like that. That would be an unauthorized change. So another reason security gets involved is to go out and do that. And the last piece, which people don't always think about security, uh, we include it, is availability. If your systems and data are offline for some reason because your internet is down, because you've had a security breach of some sort, something's broken, you can't get access to your systems. That's a security issue. Another example of that would be if you were going home at night, and when you pulled up to your house was surrounded by a bunch of armed guards and saying you can't get in. That would be, you can't get into your house. You would definitely consider that a security issue. So it's that confidentiality, the integrity, the availability of your systems. Any breach there, we call that a security incident or a security event. And I love it that confidentiality, integrity, and availability has initials CIA. So a good way to remember that. The probable truth, and what do I mean by that? I'm going to make some assertions here that I cannot guarantee, and I wouldn't bet against it, and I'd even bet that it's probably going to happen. So one thing is we know for sure is that systems, while they might be easier to use for some of us, computers used to be a real challenge for a lot of people, but now everyone of all different skill levels can use computers, and part of that is because they're getting more complicated, not less. So under the covers, things are way more complex, and that makes with security, complexity makes things more of a threat. So the more complex systems get, the more security threat they're there, and as systems get more and more complicated, the threats are increasing. I'm asserting you will have one or more security incidents, some breach of your CIA. Now, am I going to bet the world on this? No, but I'd bet $1,000. I'd bet more than that you will have some kind of security incident, whether that's somebody trying to hack you, um, someone's trying to phish you and get your credentials, or even being successful in some of that. And I know that to be true because I've been doing this now for we're finishing up our 24th year here in a couple of months, and everybody gets it at some point, some kind of something. So that's why I say it's not a guaranteed truth, but it's a probable truth. And along with that, we're talking about security as a process. We're going to be talking about some products and things, educating you on that. And so even with all of that, while you can reduce the size and scope, nothing's going to be 100% effective. Nothing's 100% in prevention. So it's going to be this education that you're in now and other education you might take on, the planning, the preparation, the implementation of some of the things I'll be talking about here. Those are really the only effective actions you can take that are going to even give you a shot at avoiding an incident or recovering from one. So you really want to look at this as, hey, I'm never going to be 100% guaranteed. It's likely to happen. So what are the things I can do to get into action on now that are going to give me the best shot of avoiding, if possible, or recovering when it happens? And this point, let's not have this be lost on anybody. You've got to be right 100% of the time. Hackers need to be right just once. And hackers are going after you all the time. You might wonder why, and why isn't as important as the fact that they are. Everyone is under constant attack, whether it be via email, people poking at your firewall, people trying to get at your cloud services, things like that. So let's jump into some of the meat and potatoes here. And first thing I want to talk about is what are called user account privileges and rights. So, when you come into the office, when you log into your computer or you log into your phone, I'm going to focus on computers right now, your desktops or laptops. One of the first things you get when you're a new employee or when you're signing into that computer is you get that ID. It might be your email address or some form of your name or something like that. And what that means is someone has created an account for you inside the security system of your network, and then you've got that ID. The other thing that happens in the background is those login IDs are actually assigned privileges or rights that either allow or disallow your access to what you can do on your computer and how you can configure your computer. There's lots of ways you can kind of twist and turn some of these rights and privileges, but fundamentally there's two groups. There's the standard users and administrator users. The key thing to remember here is whatever user ID and whatever user ID you use and whatever rights you've been assigned, those are what you run with on your computer. So when you log in, if you're a standard user, you can do everything that standard user rights and privileges can do. If when you're logged in, you're part of an administrative group, you can do everything that an administrator can do. And where that becomes a challenge, what's unique about administrators over standard users is administrators can install and modify software and configurations. So why is that a big deal? Oh, I have my slides mixed up here. So I'll talk about a couple of best practices here. So you want to, I think I have my slides, wait one sec. Oh, I think it's all here. Sorry about that. Okay, so what are some of the best practices around user accounts? So what you want to do is let's take a step back. So when you log in, if you are a standard user, you're going to go about your day, right? You're going to open your email, you're going to send and receive emails, you're going to browse the web, you're going to do those things. Same thing happens if you're an administrator user. If you're part of that administrator group and you log into your computer, and you may not even know if you're part of the administrator, so that's something you want to audit at some point, is you're still going to go in and do those same things. You're going to open your email, you're going to open your web browser, you're going to do those things. Now, one of the things that happens when you're in email is people are trying to phish you to try and get information, maybe send you a malicious attachment that you can open up and it'll install a virus on your system or take over your computer. Same thing with the web browsers, right? We've all had those pop-ups and some of them are saying, hey, you want to install some software here, or some of those pop-ups are fake pop-ups that say, hey, your computer's infected, click here. Well, if you're a standard user, those are going to happen. If you're an administrative user, they're going to happen. The difference is if you actually take that action to install that software and you're an administrative user, it's going to do it. It's going to happen. If you're a standard user, it's going to prompt you for these administrative credentials to actually do it. So it creates a separation. That's why we want to have a separate account with administrative privileges that you use when you're patching and modifying software on your computer, when you're reconfiguring a computer. You want to have a separate account. Don't use the same account that you've got for your regular day-to-day usage. And then limit your day-to-day logon account to standard user privileges. Those are the ones that most people need, and in most cases, you rarely need administrative privileges. It's only when you're going to be updating your computer or something. So you want your day-to-day login to be standard user. It can run applications, it can get access to what it needs to, but it can't do major configurations to the system. And in fact, someone did a study that running as a standard user would prevent attackers from exploiting 94% of the critical vulnerabilities that Microsoft patched that same year. That's an astounding amount. I mean, 94%. We talk about We're going to talk about patching later. We talk about hacks and people trying to get you to install software and viruses and malware and all of that. Simply running as a standard user can prevent the vast majority of those kinds of issues. So this is one you really want to consider. And you want to know who's got it and who doesn't. So you want to audit all your user accounts and see, are you a member of those administrative groups or not? You want to check that in because you might have something legacy, some user account that is an administrator that you don't want to be. Um, Maybe something got misconfigured. These are just check boxes, and when you're setting up an account, so it's easy to click the wrong thing. So you want to periodically audit it and know what's happening. And you want to protect your user accounts, especially your cloud accounts, with strong passwords and two-factor authentication. So while you have your user ID, maybe it's your email address or whatever, you also have that password with it. We're going to talk a little bit about strong passwords. You want to make sure you've got good, strong passwords. And one of the best protections you've got is doing two-factor authentication. And this is whether you've got administrative accounts or regular day-to-day login accounts, regardless. You want to protect both levels of accounts with strong passwords and two-factor authentication. So a little bit about best practice here. So strong passwords, what we mean by that are passwords that are hard to guess or hard to hack. And what happens when people talk about they got hacked or their Facebook account got hacked, a lot of times what happens is someone guessed their password in some way. And there's a couple different ways they might be able to guess that. Maybe they were using a single dictionary word or a common phrase. You know, people have done studies of passwords, and sometimes very simple passwords like sexy or monkey or things like that become people's passwords. And so those are very easily guessed. And in fact, the hackers have dictionaries. They'll actually run your password database if they get access to it somehow. They'll actually first run it through all the common words in the dictionary, and a computer can chew through those passwords very quickly. So if you're using something simple like that, or even a combination phrase, they're getting smart about that too. They can crack those pretty easily. So when you're creating your password, even if you end up doing a single dictionary password for some reason, maybe you do use monkey and then put, upper and lowercase letters in it. Use special characters. Use numbers. Something to change it so it's not just monkey, but it's some form of it, right? But again, the hackers are pretty smart about that, and humans are pretty bad at creating passwords a lot. So, you may think you're coming up with something clever, but in reality, thousands of people have already come up with that. So you want to be careful when you're doing it, but you want to make it not something simple. Also, a long password is better than a short password, because if they have to do something called a brute force attack, so let's say somehow they get access to your password database and they start trying the different passwords. The first thing they're going to do is run it through a dictionary and see if any of your passwords are open to those kind of attacks. The next thing they're going to do, or one of the next things they're going to do, is what's called a brute force attack. And this is literally where they try every combination, every permutation of letters, numbers, special characters to try and get to your password. Because they never know how long your password is, they just know whether they get in or not. There's no indication of, well, you only typed 2 characters and really this is a 20-character password, or, you used the word monkey, but really, the password has upper lower case. There's never any indication of that. So literally they have to try A, and then AA, and then AAAA, and all the way through, and then AAAB and AAABC. They literally go through all that. Now again, computers can do that pretty quickly, but there's so many permutations that even the fastest computers that are out there, even some of these supercomputers that are out there, can still take centuries to process and try and go through every permutation of a very long password. So you want to have it long, you want to have it include those special characters. And in some cases, those are kind of a pain in the butt to type in. They're hard to remember. So another thing you can do is use padding to increase the length. So maybe you've got some core password of 8 to 10 characters that you really remember well, and it's pretty good for you to type in. come up with something else that's easy enough for you to type and remember that increases the length. And literally, it could be you could add like, 5 periods and 5 commas. That adds 10 characters to your password. And again, the people hacking it have no idea what your password's like. They don't know how long it is. So a simple password gets extended out by 10 characters by using 5 periods and 5 commas, and suddenly you've exponentially increased the complexity of your password and the difficulty of hacking it. Another crucial thing with passwords is don't reuse passwords across systems. Passwords do periodically get hacked for a variety of reasons. And when they're hacked, they're put out in the dark web, they're sold to hacker groups, and they can go through and look and they'll say, okay, here's your email address. Oh, here's your password for maybe there was some service you signed up for, movie passes or something like that, and that movie password database gets hacked. They'll look at that and they'll say, oh, here's your email address. Oh, here's your password. You're using monkey123 as your password. Okay, great. We know that. So now we can go into the MoviePass system that you were on and get in there and maybe get up to some no good there. But what's likely to happen is they're going to now go try. They know your email address, which is almost always a very common ID that people have. They now know that at least one of your passwords is monkey123. They're now going to use automated technologies to try and log into your Amazon, your eBay, your bank, your Google Drive, your Office 365 Drive, all of that by using those reused passwords. So that's why you want to be careful about what you're using there and not reuse passwords. That's one way that people get hacked into because maybe their software got, like I said, breached at one point, and then they use that to log into their Facebook or their LinkedIn account or that kind of a thing. So don't reuse passwords. Passwords are a pain. We're still a pretty password-driven environment out there, and there are some technologies coming out that might diminish the need for passwords, but it's going to take a long time for that to be across everything. So one of the things you can do, which we'll talk about, is using a password manager to help you generate and store and retrieve those passwords. So you can do it in a secure way and make it easier for you. And even with the best passwords, when people talk about phishing, which is when someone sends you an email and, somehow convinces you to give them your ID and password through that phishing email, even if you've got a really long, complex password, if you give it away, someone's going to have it. So one other way to get around those passwords being lost is something called two-factor authentication, which some of you are probably already using in one way or another, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Two-factor authentication, again, great security, critical to protecting your ID and what your ID can do. So let's talk a little bit about password managers. There's a number of them out here, and I like LastPass. LastPass is a good one, so that's what this is a screenshot of. What is a password manager? It's a system to securely store your passwords, helps you avoid reuse. It generates crazy long passwords. Like if you look at this password, N8 pound C9, I mean, most people could never even come up with a password like that on their own, let alone remember it or even type it in reliably, even if you wrote it down. So password managers make it very easy to create a complex password. They also have plugins for your web browsers and for your phones, so it makes it easy to retrieve the password, copy it to the clipboard, and then paste it in where you need it. So you don't have to even if you use it to create a complex password, you don't have to necessarily type it in. You can just copy and paste it. So LastPass is a great one. There's a couple other ones out there called Dashlane and 1Password. Some of the benefits of these password managers are they have enterprise or family versions so that you can share passwords inside your office or inside your home with your family and give control over those. So you can have it set up that you can easily, if you've got, let's say, 1Password for like your Netflix account and you want to share it with your family members, you can put the password in securely and then share it with them through something like LastPass. And it's even more important if you've got an enterprise version. So if you've got, no doubt everyone in your organization is running around with lots of passwords. What happens if they create a password and they leave? What happens if they leave and you want to retain all those passwords? So those enterprise family versions are great for that. Another great feature is an emergency mode. Um, Emergency mode, you think about you've got all these great passwords out there and they're all securely stored in this database. Uh, what happens if you've got a problem? What happens if some unfortunate event happens? What happens if somebody dies or somebody goes into a coma or something like that where their passwords are now locked up in this super secure database that only they can unlock? Some of them have these emergency modes. So for example, here's where I'm using this. We use LastPass and we have a family account. And I've got a son he's 18 now. He just turned 18. He's going off to college. So he's putting all his passwords in his LastPass database. Knock on wood, nothing ever happens to him. If something happens, if he gets in trouble, what I can do is I can request access to his password database because he's got me listed as an authorized requester. And then there's a mechanism in there that you can set up a duration. So he'll get notified, hey, dad wants access to your password database. You can say within that notification, you can set it to be 4 hours or 6 hours or 2 days or a week or whatever you want it to be. When I make that request, he gets notified. And if he doesn't respond to the request to say, no, don't allow this within a certain period of time, whatever you set, I will then get access to all his passwords. So do yourself a favor, especially for your family. We have so many passwords. Unfortunately, there's a lot of awfulness going on in the world right now, and before that, people still died and went into comas and things like that, of course. So, do your family a favor. Set up something like this. Put your 401k passwords. You can even sometimes you can scan documents and put them in here too. Put that information in a place where, again, you may not want to give it to them now, but again, if something happens, you want them to have easy access to this stuff, right? If I die, I don't want my family struggling with passwords to try and get to my accounts as they're helping to sort out my affairs. Make it easy on them. Do this now because it's very difficult after the fact to get access to that information. Two-factor, or sometimes known as multi-factor authentication. So when you think about your ID, that you've got your ID, but really you've got one factor of authentication if you just have a simple ID and password, right? You've got your ID, but most people know what your ID is because a lot of times it's your email address. It's that password, right? So you've got one factor to get in that prevents anyone else from getting into the system as you. And we've already talked about some ways where that password can maybe get out of your control if you're successfully phished or someone looked over your shoulder or whatever it is that somehow got your password. Now the problem with some of these examples of like a web-based thing, let's say it's your email account, right? And you've got a web-based email access. That's your web-based email is accessible anywhere around the world. Anyone in any country, anywhere they've got internet from any device, they can try and connect in and log in to your email. So if they get that password, someone in Russia, someone in China, the Nigerian prince or whoever it is, you get those fake emails that show up, whatever that is, they now have access to your password. So what can you do to prevent that from them getting that if they get the password? It's the second factor of authentication. And this is one of the best security tips in this presentation. You want to enable two-factor authentication everywhere you can, on your email, on your bank accounts, any place you order from, any business websites you use, anything you want to enable it on. And why is it so secure? Now, I know most of you probably have an ATM card or a time card if you grew up in Wisconsin. The ATM card has a really bad password associated with it, right? Almost everybody's ATM PIN number is somewhere between 0000 and 9999, right? I think I did 4 of each, right? So it's a defined set of 10,000 numbers. So literally someone could, if they wanted to, try every single one of those numbers, and a computer can chew through that in a split second. What makes ATM secure is you've got that card. And without the card, you can't do anything. That becomes that second factor. And most of us have been trained since birth to protect our keys, protect our wallet, or protect our purse, protect your ATM card, guard it with your life, and start to panic if you don't know where it is. Don't lose that. And if you lose it, report it right away, because that second factor is so critical. So the rest of the world, we do these other sites, you've got different ways of second factor authentication. So one that a lot of people are very familiar with is maybe you log into your bank account and they either text your phone with a 6-digit code you have to put in, or they email you a code. So someone needs access to your email, or they need your phone to be able to receive that text, to be able to put that code in. So even if somehow you're accidentally phished and that person in Russia, they're trying to log into your accounts, they're going to log in with your ID and password, but the code's going to come to your phone. And hopefully they don't have your phone, right? So that's what we mean by second factor, and why it automatically makes things way, way more secure, and why it's so crucial to core security best practices. Even better are these authentication systems where you install an app and then you scan a QR code and then you get this ever-changing 6-digit number, because there are some ways that text messaging can get hacked. There are some methods out there to do that. So that could be intercepted by someone else that's pretty savvy about it. They'd have to really want to do it, but they'd have to be pretty savvy about it. If you have one of these apps on your phone where you have to punch in these ever 6-digit changing codes, way more secure. This key with this little dongle on it here, that's what's called a hardware two-factor or hardware token. Those are really secure as well, because you keep your keys with you all the time. And so not only have to have your ID and password, they've got to have that extra key to get in. You plug that into your computer. Google issued those to like 90,000 of their employees and had no breaches during that time while they were using that technology of a password breach, because they had those security tokens. The last two-factor is who you are, and that's the biometric stuff. That's the where you use your phone and you look at your phone and it looks at your face and unlocks it, or you have a fingerprint reader on there and that does that. You know, uh, that's very secure, and it's not as secure as the 6-digit code or the hardware key. We're all unique individuals in the world, but there are those people that look a little bit like us. But the problem with some of these technologies is that it has to read what your face looks like. It has to read your fingerprint. And sometimes it just doesn't work well. It's broken, or they find things that they didn't think about that got in the way. Like, for example, Apple touted its Face ID technology, which is really great, and I use it for a lot of things. And they said, even if you're sleeping and someone holds your phone up to your face when you're sleeping, it's not going to let you in. Well, someone took a pair of glasses, and then over the top of the glasses, they put a little piece of black tape over each eye, and then put a little white dot in the middle, and then suddenly the Apple phone was able to open up based on that. Samsung came out with their flagship phone. I think it was last summer, last fall, and that fingerprint reader has to have your fingerprint. It worked great. Someone put a screen protector over their phone, a $3 screen protector. Suddenly any fingerprint worked. So some of those technologies they're still a little uncertain. So if it's really critical, you want to be careful with that. But two-factor, enable it everywhere. Let's talk about patching. So patching is when you there's changes that come out to computer programs or supporting data that you use, and those changes are meant to update, fix, or improve that software. So that often includes fixing security vulnerabilities and a lot of times other bug fixes. If you look at apps on your phone and you update an app, they give a little change log of what happened. A lot of times just says, security fixes and bug fixes. You don't even know what they fixed, but they're fixing something. So those come out frequently. How often are you updating things on your phone? Sometimes they come out, it seems like every other week. So you always want to do those patching, and that process is to install those updated computer programs. On your phone, sometimes it does it automatically. Sometimes you have to manually do it. On your computer, your desktop at work, sometimes those need to be done manually. Sometimes they can be automated. But patching, when we talk about patching, it's putting those updates on. So why even bother patching? Hackers and researchers are actively looking for bugs and holes, or another term for that is vulnerabilities, in your software. If you've got Adobe Reader, which probably almost all of you have, there are hackers and researchers actively looking for bugs and holes in Adobe Reader to see if they can somehow find a vulnerability in it, either to prove something or to steal something. When researchers find it, they're often found, and then they're reported, and then the software publisher will release a patch to fix the bug or close the hole. Hackers, obviously, they're not really interested in reporting those. They want to keep those to themselves until some researcher finds it. 70% of organizations that suffered a security breach cited a known vulnerability that went unpatched. These are big companies that this is happening to. The Equifax data breach that happened, the big credit reporting agency, they got in through some unpatched software. Had they patched it, that wouldn't have happened, at least not that way. So patching is critical. That's why we say we want to do it. And so here's some best practices around it. There's a lot of things you've got to patch, right? So you want to patch your operating systems. If you're running Windows or a Mac, those updates come out regularly. You want to make sure you're putting those in for Windows and OS 10. You've got the applications that are out there. So your Office applications, your business software that you use, the applications on your phone, you want to be always patching those. You also have software that needs to be patched on hardware. So your computer, before you even run Windows or Mac on it, there's something on a chip called your BIOS. Periodically that gets updated. You may have a firewall or some other security device. Those need to get patched and updated. You may have a TV, a smart TV that's really cool hanging on your conference room wall. There's software in there. If that's connected to your internet, you want to get that patched and updated. If you've got printers, there's printers that actually have software in the printer. That's why they're so smart. Those need to get patched and updated. So there's a lot of places to look to make sure you're doing that. If you've got something you're not using, some old software that is not being used, just remove it. Check with your IT provider, check with the person that manages your network or whatever. But sometimes you get a computer and it's loaded with software you don't even use anymore. Maybe it's something that you used to use or that you were trying to use at one point. You never uninstalled it. You want to uninstall it. Get rid of it if you're not using it. And same thing with hardware. If you've got a printer that you're not using anymore but still connected to your network, get it off the network, remove it. If you've got a smart TV hanging on your wall in your conference room and you're not using the smart features, you're just plugging in your HDMI cable to connect it to your computer, unplug it from the network. Just use it as an extra display. So you want to look for those kinds of things that you're not using and get rid of it. One person's got a question about password managers that I'll come back to in just a minute, so thanks for the question. Sometimes software is just no longer supported. You may have a really old printer or some really old software. You want to look at replacing that because that is one way that people get hacked. There are still people out there using Windows XP, even though Windows XP, except in a couple of rare instances, has not been patched in years. Same thing with hardware. If you've got some really old printer, and it's kind of a shame because it might be printing okay, but if it's got software on it that you use for scanning, for emailing, for faxing, things like that, that can be attacked if it's got security holes. And so if it's not supported anymore, if it's not patched, you might want to consider upgrading that, or at least not using it for those features anymore and taking it off the network and doing something else with it. You want to get on a regular schedule for this, at least monthly. You should be checking daily or weekly, but at least monthly you want to be patching the software. And at least yearly for hardware. Hardware sometimes is a little more difficult to hack because people need access to it, but your firewalls are directly on the internet. So in that case, you want firewalls to be updated as often as they need to be updated. And the reason you want to be watching this is that you want to watch for and address what are called zero-day exploits. Previously, I was talking about how when a hole is found or a security vulnerability is found, someone reports it eventually, and eventually the company will produce a patch that you can put in. Good ethical hackers, good researchers will follow a good protocol. If they find a hole in the software, what they'll typically do is they will notify the publisher and say, hey, we found this hole. We think it's a serious hole. Here's what we found. They give them all the data, the information, and they give the publisher some chance, some time to produce a patch. And then it gives you time to apply the patch. That's the best circumstance when that happens. What happens with alarming amount of frequency, is something called a zero-day exploit. That's where nobody knew about this. Suddenly, someone just finds out that there's a hack going on, some software, maybe it's Adobe Reader, maybe it's Microsoft Word, or Safari web browser, or something like that. That day, it's announced that there's an active attack going on. So this probably wasn't done by a researcher. It was done by a hacker, maybe a nation state, somebody like that. They're actively attacking. There's been no chance to upgrade, and the publisher puts something out like that day to maybe mitigate the patch, or that next day, or that week. So if you're on a monthly schedule, that's great. But if you don't know about those zero-day exploits, you may wait a month before you're fully patched. If you patch today and tomorrow the zero-day exploit's been found, it may take you another month before you get that update. So you got to be watching regularly. And what that looks like, if possible, is you want to try and automate as much as you can. Patching is a tedious process. If you've got a handful of computers and a handful of devices, it's not so bad. You can come in on a Saturday and spend a half a day doing it. If you've got dozens of computers, hundreds of computers, if people need to be on their computers for a long time, and you've got limited windows where you can apply those patches, you want to look at what you can do to automate your policies, meaning which software gets patched when, reporting on it, testing, updating, how all of that works. You want best practices to automate that. And unfortunately, there are patch issues that come out. Sometimes a patch will come out and it'll cause problems, and that is unfortunate, and people complain and kick and scream and deal with it. It is better to put the patches on than to not. We've run into new customers, and at the time we were looking at taking them on as a customer, and we looked and saw that some of their devices, as part of an audit process, weren't being patched and updated. And we asked them, what's behind that? And their security person had a philosophy of, well, don't patch it because sometimes it breaks things. And yes, that is true. It doesn't happen frequently, but it does happen. Uh, it's unfortunate, but you're also leaving yourself vulnerable through that entire time to avoid the potential issue from the patch. Please patch your systems. Deal with the issues as they come. It's going to happen, but it happens rarely. Patch, patch, patch. Don't wait. Okay? Let's see. So there was a question on the password managers, and someone asked, can they be hacked? And that's a great question. And the answer is anything can be hacked. And I use them. It's unlikely. Security, if done well, is uh, nearly uncrackable. Someone's got to really want to do it. Now, there have been some breaches and issues with some of these solutions. You got to really look behind the headline to see what it is that they're talking about. It may not be the kind of breach where everything's exposed. It may be more of a glitch with the software that may have caused some issue with a password or something. Um, these password systems, they encrypt the database. Um, and in some cases, like I use LastPass, and while they store my database, it's encrypted. They can't even open it. So I'm the only one that can open my password database. So while they can be hacked, again, better to use this than to reuse passwords. Better to use this than to use the same, use a simple password where you tweak it by a couple of letters. Um, and if you don't feel comfortable using a password manager, that's fine. You can use it to generate passwords and then write down the passwords in a notebook and then keep that paper copy of the notebook somewhere. The only challenge with that is it could get lost in a fire or something like that. So, you want to have some kind of a management system. Good password managers, I have no problem recommending. Uh, I feel good about that. Let's see. The same person had a question. Let's see. Don't major apps for the common user automatically update themselves? Isn't this an inherent part of Windows 365 or Adobe Acrobat? They get notices, and so um, the answer is yes. A lot of applications out there are very savvy and will do automatic patching. Um, what happens with that, and that's great. That's really handy. It takes some of the concern out. The question you might have is, okay, what applications aren't being automatically patched? Because you probably have some that aren't. Um, you might ask yourself, uh, sometimes they, you can, it prompts you to patch, and you can say, no, I don't have time to do it right now. Because I know what's going to happen when I kick off that patch. My computer is going to run for a bit, and then I'm going to have to reboot, and I don't have time for that. I'm trying to get out of here before I leave for vacation. So you may have people in your organization that haven't been applying patches, and sometimes those patch mechanisms break for some reason. There's errors where they don't update automatically, and you're not even necessarily aware of it. So unless you're reporting and monitoring on those, it may not happen. So it's great that they have the technology to do it. It's just not always reliable. So you always need kind of an extra pair of eyes to ensure that it's happening. So we talked about it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. And some of those hacks can be ransomware. Some of those hacks can be data destroying. Some of those hacks, some of the security incidents can just simply be a failed hard drive. So no matter what security things you have in place, backup is crucial. There's a lot of different ways to roll backups out. In its simplest form, there's something called the 3-2-1 backup rule. And this has been around for decades. It still holds up today. You want to make sure that all your data, your documents, your accounting data, your payroll information, your customer relationship manager, your pictures, your music, whatever it is that's critical, your business videos, whatever those things might be, you want at least 3 copies. That's what the 3 stands for. You want to have your primary copy, that's the one you're using on a regular basis, and you want to have at least 2 backups of it. The 2 backups you want to have on different storage media. So we've actually run into a situation where a new customer coming on board with us, we looked at their backups, and they had been set up to back up to the server itself. So they were having backups, which was good, but if the server totally died, they would have lost their data and their backups. So you want to make sure those backups are on different storage media, either another drive somewhere, another network attached storage. Some people still use tapes. You could be using on tapes. It could be a flash drive depending on what it is, but you want to get it onto 2 different storage medias. And then one of those storage medias, you want to get it off-site. It doesn't happen a lot. In 24 years, I think we haven't had any clients that have had a complete loss to a physical disaster, knock on wood. And there are fires, there are floods, there are earthquakes, um, there are sprinkler heads that break off and drench your server, that kind of thing. So you want to make sure you're getting a copy that's away from the main data source. So if you're backing up your server and you've got those two backups, great. Make sure you're taking one of them home, or do it automatically by saving it off to the cloud. And this includes your cloud-based services. Don't think just because you're storing stuff in Google or at Microsoft that they've got backup policies that match what you need. They back up the systems. They can restore everything if they have a disaster. But oftentimes when you want to do some kind of granular restoration, maybe you deleted a few documents, sometimes those documents, depending on when they were deleted and what kind of system you've got, may not be recoverable. So you want to really look at what the policies are, how those things get backed up in the cloud so that you can back up your cloud data. So we have clients that, like for instance, use Microsoft 365, and we actually run a backup solution that backs up all their Microsoft 365 data into another separate cloud outside of Microsoft so that they can follow their 3-2-1 backup rule. When you're crafting your 3-2-1 backup rule, this is the best practice. What is your recovery time objective? That is, how quickly do you need to get back up and running? Because your 3-2-1 backup rule, if you say, look, if my server is down for more than 2 hours, I got a problem, that becomes your RTO, your recovery time objective is 2 hours. You need a solution that will get you back up and running in 2 hours. Not all solutions do that. We know some people, for example, use a solution like Carbonite. Carbonite's a cloud-based backup solution. That's a decent solution. It backs up your stuff, it gets it off-site, it gets up into the cloud. If you have to recover everything that Carbonite has, that can sometimes take days or weeks depending on how you're trying to recover that data. And so days or weeks may not work for you in terms of what your recovery time objective is. So think about how quickly you want to get back up and running and set up your system around that. A last best practice, you got to test it out. You got to test it out. A lot of people have backup solutions they've never tested, and then when they actually need it, they find out there's a problem. Some piece wasn't getting backed up the way they thought it was. They couldn't recover their server the way they thought they could. So you want to test it out. You want to get a plan together. In some cases, it could be restoring a few files. That's good. But if you're trying to back up your entire server, how do you restore all of that and know that it's working? So there's ways to do that. You want to develop your playbook on how to do it. You want to do that full test at least yearly. Do some kind of a test to verify it works. I went into a prospective client and we were talking about their backup solution. And this goes back a few years, but it still applies today. They were backing up their server onto tape. And this guy was diligent. He came in every day, even on Saturday and Sunday. He was that dedicated to come in and change the tape. And I said, that's awesome. Is your backup working? And he said, I'm changing the tape every day. And I said, yeah, is it working? And we went to the backup software, and right on the screen, there was an error message that he wasn't looking at that said, backup failure, press enter to continue. And then the date on that message was 6 months earlier than where we were standing right then. So he'd been coming in on weekends, and he was ticked. He's like, I've been coming in on weekends, and I've even been getting backups for 6 months. So testing would let you know, monitoring would let you know that there's some issue. So you got to do that. We really recommend that. It's best practice. So let's talk a little about security awareness. I don't know how many of you grew up with neighborhood watches, or maybe you've got one now. That's where you've got everyone in your neighborhood. Everyone's got eyes on what's happening around the neighborhood, right? Something suspicious is going on. Let's investigate. That car's been sitting there for 2 weeks. What's going on with that car? Maybe you live in a cul-de-sac or something, and you know your neighbors really well, and suddenly you're seeing some people who aren't your neighbors. Well, maybe totally fine, but it may be something, right? So just kind of keep an eye on that, and then if you actually see something wrong, you want to call the cops, right? That's that neighborhood watch mentality. Another best practice is security awareness training with that neighborhood watch mentality. You're here on this presentation. Thank you for being here. What about the rest of your team? What about your family? How are they going to learn this? You want to provide training and awareness for them. You want to onboard new employees. You want to have training around security awareness. You want to be reading newsletters and alerts and testing people to see if they're clicking on things that they shouldn't. You want to target education and keep that education going and really never stop, because if you remember my slides earlier, security is just going to keep on going, right? It's not going to get any better. It's really getting worse. And maybe it'll get better someday, but until then, we got to keep that awareness training up. Create your own neighborhood watch with your friends, your family, inside your organization. If someone sees a message and they're like, oh, they're trying to phish me, this is so obviously a fake email from Russia, you might just delete it. Someone else might be having a bad day. Someone else might not have been as astute in that moment. Someone else might be trying to get some stuff done before they leave for vacation, and they click on that email and enter their ID and password. You want to let people know, because if you're getting attacked, probably they are getting attacked as well. So please develop that neighborhood watch mentality inside your organization. Everyone should be in charge of maintaining and monitoring, or not maintaining, monitoring security and knowing what's going on and alerting each other and sharing that information. As I said, it's not a question of if, it's a question of when for people that you're going to get hit. And even with all of these best practices, even with the backups, even with good passwords, um, even with security awareness training, you might still get hit. And depending on the scope of the hit, it could be significant, right? You still could get ransomware. It's in the news all the time that people that presumably have followed some of these best practices still somehow got hit by ransomware. Please get cyber liability insurance. Sometimes it's inexpensive, sometimes it's a little more expensive, and that's obviously subjective depending on what your budget is. Call your insurance agent, ask them about it. It used to be something that people just kind of had tacked on to their existing business insurance. It's carved out now as a separate thing because it can be so costly. So you want to know what your cyber liability insurance is, uh, what is it, what are the provisions of it. Sometimes, they don't just cover bad behavior. They want to know that you're doing certain things. So they might have provisions in your policy saying that you have to have a good firewall, you have to have good antivirus, you've got to have good backup, you're doing security awareness training. So you want to review those and make sure you're following those provisions. Otherwise, your claim could be denied or clawed back, and that has happened. So you want to get really clear about it. And this changes frequently. Even right now, people are looking at their policies to find out, because what happened during the pandemic, a lot of people went to work from home. Sometimes they're using not the company provided computer, but they're using their home computer that you didn't provide them and don't manage or maintain. Or are you covered if there's a cyber liability event? Changes, right? So you want to be looking for that. So that should be on your checklist as well. Pull it out, review it. If you have any questions on it, you can always ask us or your other IT provider. Talk to your insurance agent about what you need there. We talked about security as a process, not a product. There are some other products, though, that you do want to make sure you've got. And you want these to be business-grade solutions. Sometimes the free solutions are okay. They're not great all the time. They're not easily managed or monitored. Make sure you've got good antivirus, good anti-spam, great firewall with threat management. Make sure those are in place, because those can sometimes not prevent the attack from getting into your network, but prevent it from getting to your workstation, where often a lot of the damage is done. Another best practice is to go through a security audit. I'm talking about things here, and some of these things you might have to check out. So have a security audit done. We review your policies. We look at your compliance, your plans, best practices. Oftentimes, we're uncovering blind spots for you. We look at it, give you a report and action items so that you can get into any remediation you need to. Or you may not, but better to be in choice and know that you've got the issue and be able to choose, rather than not knowing it was there and then kicking yourself later. So, if security is only as good as its weakest link, and we've talked about these core foundations you need to have in place, what are you going to do about it from here? What's your plan? So thank you very much. I'm going to take you off mute here in a second. If you've got any questions about security or you'd like to discuss an audit or anything else we've talked about here, um, I think this is an important conversation. So, if you've got a business group you're a part of and you'd like to have a conversation like this, I can come in and present. If maybe you're on a board of directors for your church or a nonprofit, maybe you're just part of a group like Kiwanis or some of those clubs. I come in and do those. I want people to understand their risks. I can't force them to do anything about it, but I'm really committed they at least understand what their risk is so that they're really empowered to choose or not and do what's right for themselves and their business. So feel free to give me a call. Check us out on social media. We often post security information. Sign up for our newsletter. We oftentimes give security tips and security alerts that way. Thank you so much for your time and your attention today. I know people are busy. I know it's summertime and you got a lot going on in your life. So thanks for taking this hour and being with me today. I'm going to take you guys off chat and